do a remake, try to, get the sound as close to the original as I could, find like all the right samples and everything, and then I would upload the projects to YouTube. A lot of times I'd kind of explain like how I'm making these sounds and whatever, and then usually I'd have like a link so people could download the project file. And it says always be the right place and just wait for the right time to come along. The timeline of like what I wanted to happen in the beginning versus like looking back. I first started production like now that was 8 years ago. This can take a lot longer. You never know how long it's going to take.
Success in electronic dance music isn't just about talent. It's about handling the pressure as your career grows. I'm Dr. Sunny, performance psychologist and coach, and this is Psych Drop, where artists and industry leaders share what it really takes to build a sustainable career. Our guest today is Amel. Amel grew up in a deeply musical environment. His father owned a high-end audio company, making music an integral part of his life from an early age. Following in the footsteps of his older sister, Amel began playing the violin at just 9 years old. Although he spent many years performing in school ensembles and orchestras, a professional career in music was never part of his plan. That all changed in 2016 when he was introduced to the music of Alan Walker. Captivated by the clean, emotional power of EDM, Amel became curious about how electronic music was created. During a trip to Spain in 2018, he learned of Avicii's passing, a moment that became the final push for him to pursue music production seriously. Upon returning home, Amel downloaded FL Studio and spent hundreds of hours teaching himself the software, creating melodies whenever inspiration struck alongside his close friend C the Third. Major turning point came in 2022 when Amel caught the attention of EDM icon Afrojack. The recognition led to a defining milestone. His first collab with Afrojack immediately became a high-profile release of Our Time, a joint collaboration with David Guetta and Martin Garrix. Following this breakthrough, Amel went on to write and produce multiple records for Afrojack, including Never Forget You, In My World, and Rivers. These releases received extensive radio support and entered national charts, further solidifying his position as a rising force in electronic music. Welcome, Amel. There was so much in that intro. You've been doing this for a really long time, and so many amazing things have been happening over the past year or so for you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on the show. And it makes me sound like a real professional reading that bio.
Well, you definitely are a real professional. I'm really happy to have you here. I know we got to hang out a little bit at the EDM Awards, and I interviewed you for Loud Life magazine, but I'm super excited to be able to dive in more to some of the stories behind your success, what brought you to this point today, and also, what you're planning for the future. So I guess my first question, based on what I know about you from, your family history and music, you were really raised in a musical family. And you mentioned in your bio that a career in music was never part of the plan. So I'm curious about that.
Yeah, that's a great starting point. It's interesting. I do have that in a lot of bios around on my Spotify and different places online. It says very musical family. Neither of my parents were actually musicians per se. My dad ran, like at one point he had a speaker company, and then he sold that and he started like a high-end stereo company. So like I was always very much around music, but I didn't necessarily neither of my parents, we didn't, have a piano or anything like that. Actually, we technically did have a piano, just no one played it. But I was surrounded by music, and then I went to, it's called Waldorf School, and it's this very particular like curriculum and kind of philosophy of this certain type of school. And essentially in third grade, as part of the curriculum, every kid has to either start playing violin or cello. And so my sister I have an older sister. She started playing maybe 4 years ahead of me. And then when I got to third grade, then I got to start playing the violin. So yeah, I grew up like pretty much from that point on. I was like very involved in music in like a very specific way with the violin. And then later on, a couple years later, I started picking up guitar. Um, but I was also another part of the school and kind of how my parents raised me and stuff was largely isolated from a lot of, I mean, I guess social media wasn't as big back then, but yeah, just a lot of media in general and like TV shows. And so, like, from a, I guess, like pop culture or like electronic music or, listening to those kinds of things, like that was never really part of my world for a long time. Yeah, so it was just mostly acoustic stuff and playing. My sister and I played fiddle music and whatnot, but it never, for a long time, it never, yeah, I just never even thought of pursuing music as a career. Like the only thought of that would be if I play violin, I'm like, I don't want to play violin for the rest of my life. Like I don't want to be some concert musician or studio musician or whatever. So it just, aside from that, I was like, thought I'd be a drone pilot or a helicopter pilot or something completely different than music.
So that's really interesting. So growing up with this curriculum, playing the violin, following in the footsteps of your sister, who I know is still in the music industry, right?
Not anymore. We kind of flip flopped. It was like during high school, my sister actually did a lot of recording and mostly like acoustic recording. She had some really nice like microphones and setup, and she would record violin and guitar and sing and stuff. Got a little bit into production, but she did that, and then kind of pretty soon after high school, she stopped doing that as much, and then it was within another couple years, and suddenly I had the light bulb. I was like, wait, I guess I could do that too. That was a strange thing about it too. Is like I was around all that recording and a little bit of production for my sister doing it, and I just like it never clicked for me that like, oh, of course I could do that too.
But then you said it did click. So tell me more about like when it clicked and
Yeah, it was, I guess it was towards the end of high school. I finally, I think when I was maybe 14, I was allowed to get a phone. And so, like later on in high school, I was able to start kind of going down my own path of starting to like find my own music and my own tastes in music. And um, before I was in music, I used to fly drones. That was my past life. My previous career is flying drones, and so a lot of like I would upload those kind of videos to YouTube. And back in that era, I would like listen to a lot of, I don't know if you remember NCS, like no copyright sounds on YouTube. They had some like, there was a whole era where electronic music was like huge on YouTube, like tens, hundreds of millions of streams like on YouTube videos, like a lot of people. So I would do that. I would go on YouTube and like find all these no copyright sounds. And that's how I found Alan Walker. I used to use kind of a lot of that style of music for like my drone videos, for instance. And then, yeah, at a certain point, it just, I don't know exactly when, but I just started getting very curious. Like, I think I just realized I'm like, oh, like for a long time, it was just music existed. Like all this
Mhm.
electronic music, I was like, cool, it just exists. And then at a certain point, I was like, oh, like I guess there's someone making this music. Like, duh. And looking back, it's like, duh. But yeah, and so at that point, then I just got very curious about like how was that created. Um, and so I started, honestly, the first step in that whole process was like just looking at Alan Walker. And at that point, he was very like incognito and still wearing the mask, and like no one knew what his face looked like and stuff. But he had a few videos, a few little tiny interview clips. And so I would just like obsess over those and look through and, find little snippets of like what program does he use and what, so slowly I would just gather these little points of information. And eventually I'm like, okay, this is the program he uses, and let me download that program. And yeah.
wow. So there was a point of, discovering the music and then really liking it, enjoying it as a consumer, and then realizing this is something you could do, and then investigating that further about how to do it.
Yeah, 100%.
Very cool. So I know that, you have been doing this for a while, and I'm curious about how you're able to build consistency maybe before the momentum started with your career.
Yeah, that's a good question. For me, I've always had a very obsessive personality. Like I'll find a new thing and just get like totally obsessed with that thing, whether it's at one point, like I said, it was drones. At one point, I got very into like cars and taught myself how to work on cars. And yeah, music was one of those things. And so honestly, I think my biggest struggle has just been forcing myself to like narrow down those interests and like
Mhm.
do the follow through, because I've had so many interests, and even now, like sometimes that's a challenge. I'll have to kind of keep bringing myself back. But it was mostly just like a searching process of, and I feel very lucky too, like that I got to start finding those things that I really enjoyed, even in like middle school and throughout high school. So I kind of got to start exploring some of those interests and like get some of that out of my system a bit earlier on. When I found music production, that was in like 2018, and for a couple months I just got totally obsessed. I was staying up super late, coming into work late because I was staying up late trying to like figure out music production and whatnot. Um,
Mhm.
and yeah, it was like this couple month obsession, and then throughout maybe the next couple years, it was a lot of bouncing back and forth between being super obsessed with music, but then also having these other passions. And I was just like jumping around from music to video. And my buddy got me into paragliding. There's just all these like different things. And so, yeah, but at that point, even when I first started just messing around with electronic music production, like that was kind of just stuck very deep. And that was a theme that kept coming back up and up and up and up. And so at a certain point, I actually remember telling my friend, I think pretty early on, I was like, I think I found the thing that I like really want to pursue. Like I think this is the thing that I'm willing to drop everything else and like really go after this.
Wow. So there was actually a moment where you said that out loud to a friend.
Yeah, and that was like I said, it was still early on. I mean, even after that point, then there was still another few years of like doing music intermittently,
Mhm.
kind of dropping off and then coming back to it and all that. But yeah, eventually I came back around and was very clear. I'm like, okay, like I really got to focus and really got to drop some things, clear out some space so I can do that. But it was the thing. And I just thought about this recently, like back to that moment. And I was kind of proud of myself for actually having that follow through.
Mhm.
It's like, oh, wow. Like that's the thing that I said I wanted to do. And I'm actually doing it. Like that was a very cool full circle moment.
That's huge to be able to think back to that and then all that's happened since then to where you are now, right? And having that moment where you knew this was the thing you wanted to do. And like you said, you made it happen. You stayed consistent. And, here you are with so many cool things happening.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot has happened, and in like a very crazy way that so many things have lined up, in ways that I could have never really predicted. And I think I've gotten lucky in a lot of ways. And also, I've put in the work to make those things happen for sure.
Yeah, so I'm curious to learn more about that, the industry relationships that you've developed, the collabs. I think so many artists are curious about how to get collabs, how to get noticed. So can you talk a bit more about how that's happened for you, what it's looked like?
Yeah, of course. So the genius move that I pulled with having no idea that I was doing it. Like looking back, it was a great move, but in the time, it was just kind of what was natural for me. Is I started basically uploading a lot of videos to YouTube. So I started even pretty early on when I was teaching myself music production. I started in the beginning, it was it was all Alan Walker, and eventually it switched to like Martin Garrix and different things. But I started doing like remakes of songs. Or just, there was a bunch of songs, like I said in the beginning, there was a bunch of Alan Walker songs that like I loved his music. And so, yeah, I would just try to find maybe little YouTube videos on how to create that specific sound or whatever. And back then, there wasn't as much access to like project files necessarily, but you could find little videos on, maybe you could download a little preset or something like that. And so I've always liked figuring things out. I've always been like pretty good with figuring things out on my own and like kind of reverse engineering things. So yeah, I would just like download a preset and open up the synthesizer, and there's 5 million knobs and buttons and whatever, but you kind of study like, okay, this sound sounds like this, and like what are they doing to create that sound? And then you find another sound and do the same thing, and eventually you can kind of catch on to patterns and sort of learn how like the sounds are made and what samples people are using. And so yeah, then I started, once I was kind of a little bit knew what I was doing, I would start recreating some of these songs as best as I could, and then I would just upload those videos to YouTube. And again, that was, for a while, it was off and on. And then I think it was like the fall of 2021, I sort of made a decision to like really dive a lot deeper and like really focus on that. And I basically, at that point, I just started doubling down. By that point, I had gotten a lot more into like club music and Martin Garrix and that kind of thing. But I just started pumping out a bunch of these remakes. And so I would do a remake, try to, get the sound as close to the original as I could, find like all the right samples and everything. And then I would upload the projects to YouTube. A lot of times I'd kind of explain like how I'm making these sounds and whatever. And then usually I'd have like a link so people could download the project file and, sort of learn for themselves. And I had no idea this would happen, but it turns out Afrojack is one of these people that he's been doing this for 15, 20 years, but he still looks at those YouTube videos sometimes. Like if he wants a certain sound, instead of trying to, spend 30 minutes trying to recreate it, he'll just go on YouTube, look up whatever song, be like, oh, hey, so and so already remade the sound, download it, and then he has it. And so he ended up finding me because I had put so much stuff on YouTube, ended up finding me through that. And I don't know if he downloaded one of my projects or whatever, but he saw like that I knew what I was doing and could hear the quality of my work, and just ended up reaching out to me one day.
Wow, amazing. So, but it does sound like, this wasn't just a one-time thing. You mentioned you were putting lots of videos out there for a while, just putting music out.
Yeah. And that was a big reason for me, like specifically YouTube, is I have many different YouTube channels. I had started a YouTube channel for my drone work, and then I started another one for like car stuff. So I had kind of a background in doing YouTube. So like that was kind of the natural progression for me, rather than like a lot of people will focus on Instagram or something now, for instance. So that was just, yeah, kind of the platform that felt natural for me. And I don't even know if it really matters. I mean, I think you can kind of do the same thing now, leveraging more social media, Instagram, stuff like that. But yeah, it was just the fact that I was doing work, but then also putting it out there. And, I got quite lucky that it ended up in the right hands that it did, and with Afrojack. But yeah, Afrojack has this, he says, be in the right place at the right time. He says, always be at the right place and just wait for the right time to come along.
That's a great saying. And it sounds like that's exactly what you were doing. You were being in the right place over and over and over.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't know it. Like I said, it was very unintentional, but looking back, it's like, okay, I was setting myself up, and then yeah, obviously like the right time did come along at some point. It ended up honestly happening a lot quicker than I was expecting, but like I had put in the work to, so to speak, be in the right place. And then, yeah, it was just a matter of time until that moment came and Afrojack saw my work. And then that was the start of kind of everything that's unfolded since.
Yeah. And, I know you say you were a bit lucky, but also at the same time, you're saying you put in the work, right? You had a quality product, you honed your skills, you were building your skills over and over, and then you were consistently putting yourself out there. And then the right time came,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
which I
Definitely.
think is so big because a lot of times artists may hesitate in putting their stuff out there.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I mean, I had that hesitation too, at least with like original music.
Hmm.
That was sort of my plan as well with the YouTube stuff, is like I knew, because I had done this with other YouTube channels as well, like I knew if I could make videos that were searchable, that like people would look up, then I would get more traction, more views. And so I was like, okay, if I can build up an audience on YouTube before I put out my original music, and then once I have a little bit of an audience, then I can start putting out music. It's not going to be a huge audience, but like at least it'll be more than nothing. It'll be more
Hmm.
than just releasing your music to 0 followers and like hoping it catches on. So that was, yeah, I put out a bunch of videos and tutorials and stuff, and then at some point then I started kind of every now and again I would release an original song, and then I had like a couple thousand subscribers or whatever, and at least those people would be able to see the original music.
Hmm. So it sounds like the putting yourself out there piece was a process for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think a process that has paid off for sure.
Yes, big time. Big time. And that's transition, now I would say more of my putting the stuff out there is more focused on like Instagram or something. I have most of the stuff I put on YouTube now. I'm still quite active on YouTube, but like now, a couple years later, now it's mostly original work, which feels great to have transitioned over. And it's like most of my videos now are just my own original music. But yeah, I mean, you can have the best song in the world, but if it goes to an audience of 0 and no one hears it, then no one hears it.
I agree. I really think that is so key. You have to have a quality product first. But if you have the best song in the world, like you said, if no one hears it, if you don't have an audience, it doesn't go anywhere, it doesn't translate. And it sounds like you had this skill of building an audience on YouTube, even with other channels before the music related one. And you really shifted that skill to the music with YouTube and now more on Instagram, but really being able to put out your work so people can see it and discover it. And then that's exactly what did happen.
Yeah. And it's totally a real thing where you just have no idea what eyes are on you. I mean, I could have never predicted that Afrojack, who knows that Afrojack watches YouTube videos like that.
Right. I didn't know until now.
There you go. And I think it happens a lot more on Instagram now or TikTok
Mhm.
or whatever. But yeah, if there's easily the chance that you put out something, and a lot of big DJs, especially now, are checking social media for cool remixes or yeah, new producers or whatever. So yeah, I mean, even just putting out stuff, I remember in the beginning, I definitely felt underprepared. I didn't think my stuff was good enough or like up to the level I wanted it to be at. But
Mhm.
even just forcing myself to put stuff out, even if I thought it was maybe not as good as it could be, like that it does pay off.
I think that's huge. You have to start putting stuff out there before you feel like it's at the ultimate level that you're trying to get to, because production is such an experience of growing as you go and building that consistency, building your skills at the same time. And like you said, you never know who's watching or listening. And in terms of the collabs, you've had so many incredible collabs. Like, take us through the collab process or things that you did once Afrojack did, notice you and was interested in your music.
Yeah, so once I started working with Afrojack, I pretty much spent almost an entire 2 years like very behind the scenes. I had this
Mhm.
idea that once I was connected with Afrojack and he wanted to sign me to his label, I was like, dude, I'm set. I'll be like releasing huge tracks this year, and like my career's about to take off. And it took pretty much another 2 years of just doing a bunch of studio work. And I mean, even in that time, there was kind of working behind the scenes. I got to work on some production work for Afrojack, or he would be working on other projects with other big artists and stuff. So like he would try to set me up working on projects that like could potentially end up being collaborations, or I could get some like production credit on something, whatever. Um, but it still took a long time before I actually um but yeah, it was still a lot of like building up the skills and the production quality and everything to get to a point to be able to like work with bigger artists. Yeah, I mean last year was the first time I actually got to release a track with Afrojack.
Mhm.
Like it took almost 3 years of working with him before we did anything together publicly, essentially.
Wow. So there was a period of years, like you said, where you were really honing your production skills and working with Afrojack behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean when he found me, like obviously I was at a level that was good enough to like catch his attention.
Hmm.
But I mean, I remember when I first started working with him, like I felt so underprepared. He's like, he's like, you know what you're doing. You can make these productions sound really good. I'm like, in my head, I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, no one's taught me. It was the type of thing, like, if you go to school or go to college or something, and like someone gives you a certificate, it's like, you've learned this, whatever that thing is. I think there's a
Hmm.
certain sense of like accomplishment or like feeling like you know how to do that. And so when you are self-taught in something, there's obviously no certificate. It's just you're kind of learning this stuff on your own. And I think largely in music that's usually how it goes. But there was definitely the part of it that I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Um, and
But
so
Afrojack thought differently.
he did. He did, which was obviously a big, boost of confidence. But it's still, I mean, just looking at where I was in the beginning a couple years ago working with him and the progress I've made in those last couple years, like, I mean, yeah, a huge difference. Like these last 2, 3 years has been mostly because at that point I got to start working on music full time.
Hmm.
And so the learning and the accelerating in like getting better at production that just like compressed, you know, my work got so much better in like such a shorter time span.
And it sounds like during that time when you made the shift to full-time music, you were putting in so much more studio time.
Yeah, because it went from making music as much as I could, but still having to work other random jobs and whatnot, and then just being able to like work on the craft full time. There's just, I mean, it's to have like a gym analogy, it's sets and reps. And so just being able to put in so many more sets and reps, like on a daily basis, over and over and over, yeah, the progress just grows so much quicker.
Absolutely. The consistency in building those reps and just making it part of your routine, it's much easier to get stronger more quickly, like you said, just like with the gym.
Yeah, totally.
Very cool. So take us now through since this first big release, what has changed for you?
Quite a bit. Yeah, last year, I guess it was still before some of these releases came out, but about a year ago, starting in like, yeah, pretty much early like January, February of 2025, that was kind of the point where Afrojack kind of gave me the thumbs up. He's like, all right, you've been putting in all the work behind the scenes. Like, I think you're ready. Let's start bringing you out on tour. Let's start having you do some shows. And that was also kind of in parallel to that, is that's when we started working on these bigger tracks. One of the tracks that became Our Time, we were working on behind the scenes, and some of the tracks that Afrojack released last year as like his singles, and we were working on Rivers together. So we were finally starting to, get things ready. That's like, all right, it's time to like put your name out there and start releasing bigger songs, really put your name out into the world. And so, yeah, from that point, I mean, a lot of it is just some level of publicity.
Mhm.
It's like there's a skill in the work that you put into like get to that level, and then once I was there, then it's just the having my name out there. And Afrojack again was like a major piece in that, in like having my name out there. Like a year ago in March, he brought me up on stage at Tomorrowland Winter and played one of my tracks and basically announced me to the world. He's like, "Hey, here's this kid. Here's this kid I've been working with, and this is his music." And from that, and then
Wow.
releasing Our Time and stuff, then obviously start having more eyes on you. For audience, for clubs, I started getting a lot more club promoters and bookers reaching out, and yeah, it's you start building a more of an audience and a lot of fans from Afrojack and from Art and Garrix, obviously being attached to a record like Our Time. People start getting curious, like, who's this new kid?
For sure. So that first moment getting announced to the world, Tomorrowland Winter, tell us about the emotional experience of that.
It was wild. It was so wild. Um, I had talked with Afrojack about he was potentially going to bring me up on stage at Ultra Miami. So we'd kind of talked about that, and then yeah, going up at Tomorrowland Winter was completely unplanned. We at that point I had started working on a remix of Birds of a Feather by Billie Eilish.
Uh-huh.
And that was another track that sort of took off last year. I made that, sent it to Afrojack, and he ended up sending it to Martin Garrix. And Martin Garrix started playing it in a bunch of his sets. And so then during that week when we were in Tomorrowland Winter in France, that's kind of when that remix was really taking off and Martin Garrix was playing it. So I was, that the whole week just became a focus on that remix. And we started realizing it's like, oh, okay, like this thing's getting quite a lot of traction. Like, let's leverage that. And so people knew the remix. And so Afrojack took that as an opportunity to like boost me and get some eyes on me from that. Um, yeah. And it's very, I mean, that's still one of the biggest like moments frozen in my memory is getting to go up on stage. I didn't, even the night when he played his set, it was still unclear if he said maybe I'll go up on stage, but it was like not a certain thing.
Mhm.
And he also didn't tell me what track we were playing either. We had actually talked about
Wow.
playing a totally different track. And so I was kind of like waiting backstage, like maybe I'm gonna go on, maybe not, who knows.
Mhm.
He ended up playing the other track that we had talked about doing together, and I like heard it come on. I was like, am I supposed to be on stage? I was like, oh no, he just played the track and like no one told me anything. So I like ran backstage to his manager. I was freaking out. I was like, was I supposed to be up there? So part of me thought that I'd like completely missed this opportunity. And then maybe another 15 minutes later, then it's like, all right, you're going up on stage. I was like, okay, now I wonder what song is going to be played. And so, yeah, he played Birds of a Feather, and it was just, yeah, it's a crazy feeling getting to go up there. It's very different too, because like Afrojack has brought me up on stage at different clubs and things in Las Vegas and different stuff on tour, but it's mostly just kind of like I get to be up there, not necessarily in the spotlight. I'm just kind of there. But this time it was like I was up there in front of I don't know how many thousands of people, and like he specifically filters down the music and is like, hey, like this is Amel, like everybody, this is a track. And it was like very much announcing me to the world type of thing. And so,
Wow.
yeah.
That definitely sounds really wild, especially given the fact that you said you didn't know if it was happening. So it wasn't like there was this huge buildup, you know it's happening, and then it happens. You really weren't sure if it was happening, what it would look like. Then it happens.
Hmm.
And it sounds like a complete core memory.
Oh, yes. I don't think I'll ever forget that one. It's a
For sure.
little snapshot in
And
time.
absolutely, I'm sure that snapshot will live in your minds.
Hmm.
And so I know you mentioned with that came touring, and I'm curious to know more about your experience with touring and how, you stay grounded while on the road.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I I think it's a bit different for me than maybe a lot of other DJs in a sense.
Mhm.
I've had over the past like 5, 6 years, I've had a lot of kind of crazy health issues. I was dealing with like a lot of brain fog and a lot of like, I don't know if it's actually autoimmune, but that kind of stuff, like my immune system just freaking out and being super sensitive to a lot of things. And so there was actually a point like right before things kind of started taking off last year, maybe in like the summer, fall, winter of 2024, my health had gotten so bad, like I wasn't actually sure if I could keep going. I was honestly considering like telling Afrojack, I was like, dude, I need to like take a break. And I was kind of considering like quitting and trying to figure that out and maybe coming back at some point. Um,
Wow.
and so I've since then, I mean, I still deal with some of that, but I've been able to get a handle on a lot of it and see some different doctors and people. So like I've gotten it under control enough. But a lot of my like a lot of the focus of me being on tour and whatnot kind of revolves around that. Um, Trying to eat the right foods and you know get enough sleep. A lot of it has to do with diet, which can definitely be tricky on tour as well.
For sure.
So that's tough, and it also because I've had to spend so much time focusing on that aspect, like I think health and like awareness of my routines and diet and everything is like so at the front of my mind all the time that yeah, it's on tour. I think about that a lot. A big thing for me is I pretty much have been sober for a couple years now. That's,
Hmm.
alcohol is one of those things that like triggers my immune system. And so a lot of times, like I just did a couple shows with Telecast earlier this year in the US. And it was great. I was like completely sober the whole time and everyone else was drinking. And, I got some weird looks. People are trying to like hand me drinks and stuff. And I'm just like rejecting it. And um, yeah, there's a certain feeling of like not fitting in or missing out or Like that can be a culture, party culture and drinking and stuff, but just to be able to go through that tour and know that I was going to wake up the next morning still feeling good and like in a good headspace and everything, like that was honestly so much more rewarding and everything than the alternative.
So it really sounds like you're doing so much on tour when you are touring for your health, given the fact that, you've had health issues. You sort of learn that you have to put a lot of these things first, whether you're on tour or not.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and that goes over into touring, like because that's
Mhm.
just so much a part of my life no matter where I am, whether I'm home or whether I'm on the road. It becomes, I guess, a little bit more of something I think about on the road because it's, depending on different countries have different foods and stuff. Like when I'm in Europe, I try to get food with like I can't eat bread and whatever, and like, everyone in Europe is eating croissants and all this stuff. So I get some funny looks. Get some funny looks. People think they're like, "What's wrong with this dude? He can't eat baguettes and he can't eat croissants and whatnot." But yeah, it's just it becomes something that's a part of life and touring life, and for me, I have a little bit extreme version of that, but I think because it's like so much a part of my routine, no matter where I am, it's maybe a little bit easier to just like keep that routine going while I'm on tour.
For sure. Definitely challenging. Like you said, when you're traveling to different countries, it's easier to, stay in your routine where you have more control over the foods that are available when you're home.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean traveling is tough too. Like flying on airplanes and whatnot is definitely tough on the system, and your sleep schedule gets all messed up. But
That's
uh,
big.
yeah, it's just fly, and I usually try to get some exercise and stuff when I land, and have a couple different routines. I'll try to keep my circadian rhythm semi intact when I'm on the road.
I think it's so important to be doing these things, early on in the touring process, right? You have to really stay focused and mindful of health in terms of your eating, sleeping, exercising, and then, like you said, just navigating the time zone changes alone and being on planes a lot. That's enough, to really mess with you and then mess up your sleep and nutrition. Well, it has such a physical and emotional impact as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. I mean, it can be a lot to manage, and I feel, I mean, yeah, I think it's for anyone, even if you have great health, like it's probably still a bit chaotic. But, it's part of the job, and so I guess in some way I feel fortunate to like have had health be such a part of my life, or like that awareness. Then like even before I was touring and whatnot, then going into touring, like already feel a little bit prepared, just being more conscious about those things.
Right, right. It sounds like, you really learn from that experience, whereas sometimes artists don't learn until, maybe much later on.
Yeah, definitely. And it's obviously, I mean, like I mentioned, it's I think less now, but definitely part of the electronic music, well, I guess probably all music culture in general, and the, party culture and all that is like drinking and alcohol and these sort of things. I think a lot more people are getting conscious about this now. And,
Mhm.
after like everything that happened with Avicii, for instance, that was one of the, I think I've read that biography like two or three times now. Um, that was something that was really helpful as well, just to like have such a in-depth look into that world and like what can kind of spiral if you like get too far into it, and it can just be like a very quick downward spiral.
Absolutely. I think that Avicii's story has changed and shifted our culture a little bit in terms of the conversations we're having and looking at what he went through, and what how he managed performance anxiety really and keeping going when touring wasn't necessarily and playing shows weren't necessarily what he wanted to be doing. So there's so many things to take from that that I look at that have inspired my work in helping artists. And I think, we're not there yet. I think we still are. Electronic music is still a party culture, but the sobriety conversation is happening more. So many artists are now sober and talking about it. I just had Hess on the podcast a few weeks ago, and we were talking about sobriety and how things have really shifted over the years. And now there is more of a movement to take care of yourself, and that included in that is being sober and having the experience of doing shows when sober. I talked with Conrad Taylor about this, how it is so important for him to experience the show, play the show sober, as well as interact with fans sober. Like, it's just a different experience for him, and I think for the audience and fans as well.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. And there was, yeah, like I said, I mean, even just being on tour and like making a very conscious decision to like do it, because I've done both. I mean, there's been shows maybe like earlier on too when I would like have some alcohol or whatever, and it can be fun as well. But it's almost like, I think in DJ culture, a lot of the time why people started getting into drinking, for instance, is like the anxiety or like the nervousness of like going up and being in front of a bunch of people. One of the things I found for myself is in the beginning, I kind of had that same thought process too. I was like, oh God, like, I'm going to be nervous. Like, how do I calm the nerves? And then I kind of found that going out there totally sober, like I was much more in control and much more aware of like what I was doing behind the decks. And so just feeling like I could, if, something happened with the music or whatever, and I was like much more able to focus and like fix a mistake if I made a mistake or something, then that kind of had more like weight, feeling good about actually doing the technical side of things behind the decks than the audience had. And so I was like, huh, like that's interesting. Like, actually, there's like a little blip of nervousness going up on stage, but then just feeling so confident that I'm like fully in my mind being able to focus on the music and focus on the technical part, that pretty soon, 5 minutes into the show, I'm actually honestly a lot less nervous if I am sober.
Right. And less likely to make mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah. Or like if you do make a mistake, like your brain is fully present to be able to fix that mistake and just be like, okay, it's not a big deal.
Absolutely. I think, when you are sober, you can be fully present. And it sounds like you realize that that anticipatory anxiety or anticipatory stress leading up to the show goes away once you're in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, I don't actually think nervousness is necessarily a bad thing either. I think that's a big kind of reframe. Like, we have these different feelings and emotions, and largely like societally or whatever, we've kind of assigned like this emotion is positive, this emotion is negative. And so like the things that we interpret as negative emotions, people are like already have that in their mind as like, this is a bad thing, and so I must avoid it. But it's not, it's like nervousness is there for a reason. And the interesting thing about being nervous too is like basically nervousness and excitement are kind of indistinguishable. Like, it's sort of the same feeling. It's just a reframe in the mind, whether I don't know who said this, but someone talked about the difference between being nervous and being excited is like a level of preparedness. And so I've noticed that for myself too. Like, the first couple shows I did with Afrojack on tour, basically coming from like no DJ experience, I was so nervous because it was like I just never done it before. And like that makes total sense.
For
And it
sure.
doesn't mean I don't have that same feeling now, but like essentially it's, it's just a little hit of adrenaline that your body is just like, oh God, I'm going to be in front of 5,000 people. Like that's very normal. But now that I've been doing it for long enough, like, and I feel confident in my sets, and especially if I'm playing shows that I know people are there for my music, it's, yeah, you can just kind of reframe it and let that adrenaline be like that exciting feeling rather than just being like so scared.
Absolutely. I agree that those feelings are very similar. The
Hmm.
nervousness and the excitement and the being prepared, like you said, the more experience you got, it's easier to reframe that, right? Because you have the experience behind it. And I think a helpful reframe for myself when I'm doing, speaking in front of a large audience or, things like that, something that really helps me and I think also can help other artists is the reason you feel nervous before something like that is because you're doing something you really care about.
Yeah.
If you didn't care, you wouldn't probably feel those feelings. So they're like you said, they're not necessarily bad feelings. It's something to pay attention to. And, being prepared obviously is something that can help with it, but really knowing that this is part of it. Anytime we're doing something we care about, sometimes, nervousness will happen or, pre-show jitters. It's like it's leading up to doing the thing, but like you experienced, once you get into it, you're there, you're on stage, you're in it. That's the easier part.
Yeah. Yeah. And knowing that, I mean, that feeling of nervousness, excitement, whatever it is, like that's just like an initial little speed bump, and like you get over it usually. Like that feeling will generally come up, but it's like a couple minutes into the show, once you're just like in it, then it's like, oh, okay, where's that nervousness? I guess it went away.
Yes. So good to sort of keep that in mind as you're going in. Do you have any, pre-show things that you do or things that you say to yourself right before you go out there?
Honestly, I don't have a set routine like that. I kind of feel like I want to. I always love hearing like people's little routines. So I feel like as time goes on, I'll probably, create something for that. But yeah, normally I just take a little bit of like a couple moments. I'll normally spend a little time by myself, close my
Mhm.
eyes. Not quite do like a full on meditation per se, but just do like little envisioning how I want the show to be, or like the kind of the energy, or not like the outcome. I'm not so focused on like this show needs to happen this way, and like if the audience isn't reacting this way, but yeah, more just kind of putting out a little, this is how I want things to go, and I want it to be a great show, and just like being in that energy. And I think that energy also translates, like if you prepare yourself. What does Tony Robbins call that? Um, do you know what I'm talking about? He has this, like his morning routine. Hell, it's not prepping, but it's, what does he call it? I'm blanking on it. He has a really good word for like um kind of preparing the body, like preparing the mind.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't know the word that he uses, but I
Priming, that's it.
oh, priming,
Yeah.
priming. Okay.
Yeah. So it's like,
Yes.
yeah, priming yourself. I think that's the perfect word, is like you prime yourself. And yeah, I mean, you can do this in the morning too, but like before a show, it'll be like priming for, okay, this is how I want to show up. This is the energy I want to bring. And like if you can prime your own mind, then once you go out on stage, then that kind of translates into the rest of the show. And I think the audience feels that.
Absolutely. And I think, from a psychology standpoint, right, you're setting yourself up for success. You're thinking about what is the energy, what is the goal you want for the set, what is the energy you want to bring, what do you want to communicate to the audience, thinking about that can help you once you get out there. So it sounds like you do have a little bit of a routine of, taking a little time for yourself, thinking about that, getting yourself ready and prepared to have the type of set you want to have.
Hmm. Yeah, there's that. And to be honest, I mean, I think a lot of my routine or preparation or whatnot is like a much further time beforehand. Like I've realized
Mhm.
that if I like weeks or whatever it is going before a show, that's already the time when I'm like working on my music and working on my set. So by the time I get to the show, like I know everything's in place. And things might change up. You might switch your set order a little bit, like whatever happens, but a lot of the prep work is like longer term preparation before the shows, and so that also helps quite a lot to like just knowing I could show up anywhere and pull out my USB, even if I'm like it's totally out of the blue, and still like do the performance that I want.
Absolutely. Yes. The prep work beforehand, and then, that brief mental prep to get yourself prepared to, have the set that you want to have, bring the energy that you want to bring.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. So I appreciate, you giving us all of the, details about how things have been unfolding for you, what it's like to have these core moments in your career as you're, doing so much. You've got a lot going on in terms of touring. What can we look forward to? What do you have coming up this, summer?
Yeah, I'm very excited for what's coming up. Um, I have been working on an album. That's getting pushed back a little bit. I'm probably gonna end up. I wanted so badly for many months to try to push and make that album happen this year. I think we're probably gonna push it to like early next year. Just working with record labels and stuff. There's been a couple things that just makes sense to have a little bit more time and no need to
Mhm.
rush. But yeah, I think the overall like theme right now is I've had some of these big tracks with big names and collaborations and stuff, and now I have somewhat of an audience and eyes on me, and um I'm getting to the point where I'm about to start putting out a lot more of like just my work. And yeah, I don't know if I've fully like established my sound, like signature sound or whatever that is, but I do feel like I'm a lot closer to that. Like I'm finally kind of in a groove. A lot of the songs on the album I'm working on, I've started kind of bringing back a lot of my musical influences from childhood, guitar, violin. I've been doing a lot of acoustic stuff and songwriting, and yeah, I'm just very excited to like have work that's fully my own and be able to put that out there and see what people think.
Very exciting. So much on the horizon for you. I'm excited about it all. And I'm wondering for our audience, can you give us one unfiltered truth about success in EDM that people only learn after they're in it?
Yes. Let's see. Could probably give you a couple. Um, I think one, it's maybe a little bit boring, but just like we were talking about earlier, just sets and reps. Like I remember in the beginning when I was first starting out, I just had this idea that like I would look at other people's timelines about, oh, I was in the music industry for 10 years before I was successful, or I was in whatever that was. And I always had this like delusional mindset that I was like, now I can do it in like in a much shorter time span than that. And um, I would say, relatively speaking, like I've made fairly quick progress, but even so, the timeline of like what I wanted to happen in the beginning versus like looking back when I first started production, like now that was 8 years ago.
Mhm.
And so I've just been a little bit humbled by that. I'm like, oh, okay. Like this can take a lot longer. But like that kind of is the reality. Like you never know how long it's going to take. I think if you're really talented, like maybe that can kind of get compressed down, but a lot of it is just time and like the just sticking with it. I mean, even now I'm finally getting to the point where I'm able to have enough leverage to reach out to certain artists that a couple years ago I really looked up to and like wasn't even in my sphere of being able to reach out to, and finally being able to reach out to them, or like singers and working with different singers and stuff. But it's just taken, yeah, a lot longer than I maybe expected or I had the hope for or whatnot.
Mhm. So I'm hearing what you're saying is that really there is no overnight success. And also, too, it's about consistency and reps and putting in the work.
Yeah. Yeah,
Awesome.
it's definitely about that. And yeah, even just having, I think maybe to put it in like a nice concise mindset thing is like if you can have the mindset of not having a timeline on your work, then you're good. Like maybe it will take a year, maybe you get super lucky and like something just like catches immediately, but if you can set yourself up, be like, okay, I'm ready to do this thing for the next 10 years and be okay with that long term effort, then I think there's a lot less like stress and pressure on yourself. Because
I love
it
that.
is going to happen eventually. Like I think a lot of people who don't succeed is because they just stop too soon. It's like if you had kept going like a little bit longer. That was actually one of the things I remember in an early Alan Walker interview is um, he said, he's like, you never know how close you are to being at that moment. It could be the next day, it could be the next week, it could be next year, but like so many times you're like right at your moment of success. And so just like keep going a little bit more because you're probably a lot closer than you think.
So true. Those are great words. And have you reached out to Alan Walker?
Okay, crazy story. It's funny that you asked this right now. So on this Saturday, Alan Walker was playing at Red Rocks, and I'd actually like marked it down in my calendar. A friend and I had talked about like potentially we were looking at Red Rock shows, and like that was one of the ones we were potentially going to. I never bought tickets, but it was just like I just had it in my calendar as kind of a thing, whatever. So at maybe 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I get a text from Audien's manager. Audien was playing right before Alan Walker, and he says, "Hey, like Audien's gonna play our time, and are you in town? Do you want to come down to Red Rocks and come up on stage with him?" I was like, "Yeah, count me in." So canceled all my plans, drove down to Red Rocks, and it was very brief. But Alan Walker he was doing a back-to-back opening with Steve Aoki. So when they got off the stage, I got to say hi, got to meet him, say a couple quick words, and I actually found after the show, I checked the next day, and Alan Walker's following me now on Instagram. So
Wow. Full circle moment here.
totally full circle moment. Yeah, that's the guy who I wouldn't be here if it weren't for his music.
Amazing. So I'm hoping that, this will lead to more conversations with him.
I hope so. I sent him a message. He hasn't gotten back yet, but you never know.
Absolutely. That is so cool. So I have a few rapid fire questions for you. If you could just give me a one sentence answer, maybe a little tough, but
Okay,
first
do
one,
my best.
what's one lesson you had to learn the hard way?
One lesson I had to learn the hard way. I would say rejection. Being able to take rejection and still move forward. Sometimes it's rejection from people that you really look up to.
Okay. Ooh, that's a That's something you really have to learn to deal with in this industry for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, what matters more, talent, consistency, or mindset?
Yes, I read this question. I actually really love it. I'm gonna say mindset and consistency kind of equally. I would
Okay,
say mindset because if you have the right mindset, that's the thing that creates the consistency.
very true.
Yeah.
Okay, one habit every touring artist should build early on.
Uh, bring a backup USB.
Love that one. Love
Um,
that one.
yeah, I think honestly, probably a better answer would just be, yeah, preparation. But that includes making sure you have your gear, making sure you have your USB before you show up to your show.
Very true. Well, I appreciate you being here and sharing your story with us. I know there's so much more to come for you. I'm excited about all that you're doing. And, I appreciate, again, you just being vulnerable and opening up to us about what it really has taken behind the scenes to get to this point and how you've really built consistency and honed your skills to have these amazing things happen that are happening for you right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I'm so excited to share. I mean, that's been my whole thing since the start, sharing all the messy moments on YouTube and whatnot. So hopefully I'll have more words of wisdom in the future, but I like to, yeah, share as much as I can even along the journey.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for listening to Psych Drop. The conversations we're having here are about understanding what's really happening beneath performance, decision, and leadership, and how people sustain success as their responsibilities grow in this industry. I'm Dr. Sunny, and I'll see you on the next episode.